Hi everybody, welcome along today for our press conference. My name is David McNeil. I'm a freelance journalist and a member of the events committee of the FCCJ. Well, everybody I'm sure knows because you wouldn't be here, but Toru Kubota is a freelance journalist whose work has appeared on the BBC, Al Jazeera and other outlets. He was arrested on July the 30th in Myanmar while filming a small demonstration against the government in Yangon. On October 13th, a court sentenced him to 3 years in prison on charges of violating Myanmar's immigration laws. This is in addition to separate convictions and sentencing for sedition and other charges. If he serves all this time, he will be in prison for the next 10 years. The Committee to Protect Journalists has issued a statement about this case. I'll just read an extract from it. Myanmar's latest action in adding 3 years to Japanese journalist Toru Kubota's prison sentence for immigration violations is excessive, grotesque, and must be reversed. This is according to Sean Crispin. He's the CPJ's senior Southeast correspondent. Myanmar's military is sending deliberate and threatening messages to all foreign journalists that they too could be imprisoned under arbitrary laws if they report on its crimes and abuses. Myanmar is now the world's second worst jailer of journalists, next to, no surprise, China. That's according to the CPJ. Kubota-san is one of thousands of students, journalists, activists, foreigners, and other people detained by Myanmar's military government since it retook power last year after a failed experiment in democracy. An unknown number of journalists are also in hiding or have fled the country to escape harassment or arrest. Well, we have three distinguished speakers here to discuss the case and what should be done to bring Kubota-san home, because I think that's the aim. Yuki Kitazumi is a freelance journalist. He talked at the club recently. He, of course, was detained last year in Myanmar, interrogated for spreading what they called fake news, but freed after a month. Kasai Teppei is Program Officer for Human Rights Watch. He works to encourage the Japanese government to take a more human rights-based approach towards Myanmar and other Asian countries. And Myint is President of the Federation of Workers' Union of Burmese Citizens in Japan. Our interpreter today is Angela Kawashima, and I believe that Kitazumi-san is going to go first. よろしくお願いします。
はい、ありがとうございます。ジャーナリストの北住裕樹です。
Thank you for the introduction. This is Yuki Kitazumi. I am a freelance journalist.
久保田さんの拘束から3ヶ月が経とうとしているところで、このような場でお話しできることをありがたく思っています。
I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak because it has been 3 months since Mr. Kubota has been arrested and detained.
私も昨年ミャンマーで拘束されていますし、久保田さんの友人でもあることから人事ではないと感じていまして、今久保田さんの支援活動をしているところです。
So I am supporting the release of Mr. Kubota, Toru Kubota, because I am his friend, and also I was detained in Myanmar last year. I don't think that this is something that is happening to a total stranger. So this is one of the reasons I am supporting this movement.
久保田さんの経歴などはお配りした資料を参考にしていただきたいんですけれども、彼は数十回のミャンマーの渡航経験がある熟練したジャーナリストであることを強調しておきたいと思います。
His resume is being written in the document in the paper that we distributed to you. So please refer to that. But he is a very experienced journalist who has visited Myanmar on several or even more than a dozen occasions.
彼の職業倫理に従って取材を行っていただけであって、何も倫理的に責められることはしていないと思います。彼は今回、ミャンマー人を主人公としたヒューマンドキュメンタリーの撮影に現地に向かいました。そして7月30日に、フラッシュモブデモというですね、非常に短い時間だけ行うデモを取材していたところ、その後駆けつけた その終了後に駆けつけた当局者によって拘束されたと聞いています。
So he is a journalist with very high work ethics. He has only been acting in accordance with his ethics. He has done nothing that can be blamed ethically. This time he went to Myanmar to film someone, a person of Myanmar nationality, which was going to become a very short documentary. And on July 30th, he was filming what is called a flash mob demonstration, a very short demonstration. Immediately after the demonstration concluded, the authorities came and detained him.
その後、10月5日の軍事法廷での判決、こちらが7年になります。その後、12日に、こちらは通常の裁判ですけれども、入管法違反で3年の判決、合計で10年の判決を受けています。
And on October 5th, he was charged for 7 years based on what is called the electronic transactions law. And then after that, on the 12th of October, he was again charged for violating the immigration law for another 3 years, in total 10 years.
そもそもこれはジャーナリストを拘束するという誠に不当なもので、即時の無条件の解放を求めたいと思います。
So this is a completely unjust detention that has hit a journalist who has been conducting his work. And for this reason, we ask for immediate release of Mr. Kubota.
不当であるだけではなくて、今回の久保田さんの拘束に関しては不審な点がいくつも見られます。例えば、国軍側の記者会見によると、彼は7月1日にミャンマーに入国したことになっていますけれども、我々友人たちが調査した限りでは、7月13日に成田空港を発ったということになっています。これは非常にずさんな捜査が行われている、またミャンマー国軍捜査当局が非常に事実を軽視している、そのまま刑事手続きが行われているという証拠であると思います。
So, of course, we are demanding immediate release, and in addition to the fact that this is an unjust detention or arrest, there are many suspicious facts that can be found about this particular arrest. First of all, the authorities have completely neglected facts. For example, he is said to have entered Myanmar on the 1st of July, according to the military government or military junta. But in reality, Mr. Kubota left Narita airport on the 13th. We as friends have confirmed this point. So that is one fact that is incorrect. So the military tribunal or the military government has completely neglected or made light of facts, and this is another reason that we feel that this judicial decision is completely wrong.
また、彼が軍事法廷で裁かれていることも重大な問題であると思います。わずか1日の審理で、弁護士の立ち会いも認められない、そういう不公正な裁判が行われました。このことについては、法律をお配りした資料に添付していますので、ご参考ください。
Another point is that Mr. Kubota was tried in a military court, military tribunal, without the presence of a lawyer. And also, the decision was made in one single day. We believe that there was no just hearing conducted by the military government. There is a handout about the legal aspect of this issue, so please refer to that.
久保田のように現在不当に逮捕され拘束されている人間は数多くいます。 市民団体の調べでは、1万5900人がクーデター以降に拘束されたと言われています。久保田の解放と合わせて、そうした罪のない人々の解放、アウン・サン・スン・チーさんを含め、すべての政治犯の解放を求めたいと思います。
There are many people who have been arrested based on such unjust process by the Myanmar military government, military junta at the moment, citizens. And according to a citizens group, after the coup d'etat, over 15,900 people have been detained unjustly, including Aung San Suu Kyi, and other political detainees, and we would like to ask for the immediate release of these people.
9月の下旬に彼が、日本の人々に寄せたコメントがあるので、ちょっと読み上げさせていただきます。
At the end of September, Mr. Kubota sent a comment to the Japanese people, so I would like to read his comment. 署名をしてくださった方々、応援してくださった方々に感謝しています。ミャンマーは今、見えない戦争状態にあります。この国に生きる人々について注目し続けてほしいです。So I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to all those who signed for my immediate release. And this, I just want to mention that this country, Myanmar, is involved in an invisible war at the moment. I hope that we can send a message and hope to the people who are living in this country.
現在、現地の日本大使館を中心に彼の解放を求めて全力で交渉を続けている状態と理解しています。
I understand that the Japanese government in Myanmar is taking the lead in negotiating the immediate release of Mr. Kubota.
私の時よりも状態は格段に悪化していまして、厳しい交渉になるかと思いますけれども、日本政府には日本国民が不当に拘束されているというこの立場を崩さずに、妥協せずに粘り強い交渉を続けてほしいと思います。
I believe that his condition is far worse than how it was for me when I was detained. And I understand that this is going to be a very difficult negotiation, but to the Japanese government, I want them to constantly be reminded of the fact that a Japanese citizen has been detained unjustly, and to continue their negotiations without any compromise.
はい、その他質問があれば彼の状況、院選刑務所のことなどをお答えしたいと思います。ありがとうございます。
If there are any additional questions, I would like to respond to those questions, such as how he's doing in prison, etc. But thank you very much for the time being.
Thank you, Kitazumi-san. Kasai-san?
Hi. Hello, my name is Teppei. I'm a program officer at Human Rights Watch. I cover the Japanese government's foreign policy towards Southeast Asia as well as other countries. So I'm actually an acquaintance of Toru Kubota-san. I've talked to him a few times before. And today I'd like to talk about just the general situation in Myanmar and what the junta has been doing to crack down on the freedom of expression there. So just to give an overview, since the coup on February 1st, 2021, the military junta has intensified its crackdown on freedom of expression, assembly, and association, with at least 68 media workers currently detained, according to Reporters Without Borders. Security forces have also violently suppressed peaceful protests, killing at least 2,350 people, arresting more than 15,000 people, and detaining more than 12,000 people. And that's according to a local NGO called Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, AAPP. So what the junta has specifically done after the coup to crack down on freedom of the press and expression, I'll lay out now. So soon after the military coup, the junta declared martial law in 11 townships across Mandalay and Yangon. This means that charges under many of the laws I'll discuss later are being tried by military courts in these areas. This means that legal proceedings will deprive many of those charged for peaceful opposition to military rule of their basic fair trial rights, including the right to appeal. These Myanmar's military tribunals have an infamous history. Past trials were typically conducted in private inside Yangon's main prison, which I believe is where Kubota-san is being held, where the rules of evidence and procedure applicable in civilian courts did not apply. Those on trial in military tribunals face almost certain conviction regardless of the validity of the charges against them, and the trials are held outside the scrutiny of the public or the international community. Defendants involved in these military trials also face significantly higher penalties than they would in civilian court. The junta's martial law order specifies that those convicted shall be sentenced to death, prison at hard labor for unlimited years, or the highest punishment designated for the crime in existing law. In addition, all tribunal decisions are final, meaning there is no right to appeal a conviction, sentence, or the process of a trial. The only exception regards death penalty sentences. The final word on those decisions lies with the military commander-in-chief, Senior General Min Aung-Hlaing, a man who has been sanctioned by the United States, European Union, United Kingdom, and others for his involvement in serious human rights abuses. Under that context, I would like to briefly talk about specific abusive laws that the military junta has been using to prosecute journalists, including Toru Kubota. First is Section 505B of the Penal Code, which is a legal provision long used by Myanmar authorities, and I say Myanmar authorities because this penal code was used and abused by the civilian government prior to the coup as well. Authorities to penalize critical speech. So Section 505B imposes sentences of up to 2 years in prison for anyone who, quote, makes, publishes, or circulates any statement, rumor, or report with intent to cause, or which is likely to cause fear or alarm to the public, or to any section of the public, whereby any person may be induced to commit an offense against the state or against the public tranquility, end quote. On February 14th, 2021, which is just several days after the coup, the military junta revised the penal code by inserting a new provision, Section 505A, that could be used to punish comments regarding the illegitimacy of the coup or the military government, among others. The new section would criminalize comments that, quote, cause fear, end quote, spread, quote, false news or agitates directly or indirectly a criminal offense against a government employee, end quote. Violation of the section is punishable by up to 3 years in prison. Another law that is being abused by the junta is Section 124 of the Penal Code, which was significantly broadened by the junta after the coup. This Section 124A, which already criminalized comments that, quote, bring into hatred or contempt, end quote, or, quote, excite disaffection against, end quote, the government, was expanded to include comments relating to the defense services and defense services personnel, effectively criminalizing any criticism of the military or military personnel. Violation of the section is punishable by up to 20 years in prison. The newly added Section 124C imposes a prison term of up to 20 years on anyone who attempts to, quote, sabotage or hinder the performance of the defense services and law enforcement organizations who are engaged in preserving the stability of the state, end quote. This provision would criminalize efforts to encourage security forces to join the civil disobedience movement or permit unauthorized protests. Under Section 124D, a person can be sentenced up to 7 years in prison if they hinder a government employee from carrying out their duties. This provision is so broad that any actions of protesters could be interpreted as preventing security personnel or defense service officers from performing their duty. On February 14, 2021, the junta also amended the Code of Criminal Procedure Amendment Law to make offenses under Section 505A, 124C, and 124D non-bailable and subject to arrest without a warrant. So those are specific laws that the junta has been abusing since the coup. Other specific laws include Section 66D of the Telecommunications Law, Sections 499 to 500 of the Penal Code, and the Official Secrets Act. I would just like to close my opening remark reminding everyone that along with Toru Kubota, many, as Kitazumi-san said, many ordinary Myanmar people as well as journalists have been arbitrarily detained, tortured, and at least one journalist who escaped recently confessed that he was sexually abused by security forces under detention. I believe that the Japanese government should do everything it can to pressure the junta to release not just Kubota-san, but all others who have been detained. This includes targeted sanctions against junta leaders, as well as military-owned conglomerates. The junta's continuing brutality should serve as a wake-up call for Japan to take a stronger stance. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasai-san. And then last is Sui-san.
皆さんこんにちは。私が在日ミャンマー人で、日本政府に届くような日本語で話したいと思います。
So,
はい、どうぞ。
thank you for this opportunity. I am a Myanmar national living here in Japan. I'd like to speak in Japanese so that my message can reach the Japanese government.
久保田さんを含めですね、ミャンマーでジャーナリスト、外国人のジャーナリストは、今トータルで5人ぐらい捕まって履歴があるんですよ。もちろん北住さんもこの中に1人で、アメリカのジャーナリスト1人も、捕まって、アメリカの国会議員1人が来て、交渉して、解放されてたんですが、今回、久保田さんもどんな状況になるのかということは私たちはとても心配です。なぜかというと、ミャンマー国内で自由がない、その人々のために久保田さんが、あるいは北住さんが頑張って世界、日本人を含めて分かるようにこの報道をやっているところが私たちとしては、とってもありがたいし、頭を下げるしかないんですね。ただし、ミャンマーの軍事協議会、彼らの考えはそうでもないんです。彼らの権力、ビジネスを妨害する人になったら、誰でも彼らが、一応捕まるとか、ミャンマー人になったらば、殺すとか。ミャンマー人の中でも、
ごめんなさい、スイさん、ちょっと通訳の方待っていただけますか。
そうですね、ごめんなさい。はいはい。
Okay, so including Mr. Kubota, as far as I know, there are about 5 non-Myanmar nationals, journalists who are currently detained in my country. Mr. Kitazumi was one of them. I understand that one American journalist was arrested, detained, but a U.S. congressional representative negotiated, and this journalist was liberated. So I am very concerned and worried about what will happen to Mr. Kubota this time. There is no freedom in the country at the moment, and people like Mr. Kubota and Mr. Kitazumi have been filming and they have been covering my country in order to let the people in Japan as well as the world know about the situation in Myanmar. So in that sense, I am truly grateful to the work that they have been conducting. But speaking about the military council or the military government in Myanmar, they are only concerned about protecting their own power and authority or the business they are involved in. So whoever tries to violate or to come in between their power and authority or their business gets arrested. That is what is happening in Myanmar. And if you are a Myanmar national, there is a risk of being killed.
ミャンマーのジャーナリストであれば、ミャンマー人のジャーナリストであれば、 捕まって24時間で死んだ人もたくさんいます。そういうことを私たちが言えば、多分1週間でも1ヶ月でも終わらないと思うんですが、とりあえずは私たちはどうしても、ミャンマーの自由がないということを、世界を発信するような久保田さんをとりあえず、解放するように日本政府として、ミャンマーで、ミャンマーを太いパイプがつながっているといつも言っている日本政府に対して私たちも、全員日本人全員もミャンマー人全員も強く求めたということが早くそういうミャンマーに対する外交政策、久保田さんをどういうふうに解放できるような形をするのかというのはとても大事です。
So, if you are a Myanmar national journalist, you can be executed within 24 hours. That's how bad the situation is. I can speak on that many more hours. But in any case, the fact that we don't have any freedom in Myanmar is something that I want to get across, and also to request the immediate release of Mr. Kubota to the Japanese government, which has always been saying that they have a very strong connection with Myanmar to work, to negotiate, to release a Japanese national, Mr. Kubota, to conduct whatever diplomatic, to execute whatever diplomatic policy that the government can in order to immediately release Mr. Kubota.
実は2020年総選挙の時、日本がミャンマーの選挙監視団として笹川さんを派遣して、その選挙に使うインクもミャンマーにドナしてやってるわけです。その2020年選挙は終わったすぐに、それはもう正式な選挙だということを日本政府も笹川さんも言ってたはずです。しかし、国軍がクーデターをした後に、日本政府も笹川さんもカラッと変わっちゃったんです。私は、それはミャンマー政府に関する、あるいはミャンマー国軍に関する日本政府の立場を言っているだけで、もうそれも言えばもうたくさんあります。はい、どうぞ。
So in 2020, there was a general elections in Myanmar, and the Japanese government sent a man, Mr. Sasakawa, to be one of the people who would be inspecting that the elections would be conducted correctly. And the Japanese government even sent ink for the pens which were going to be used during the elections. They donated the ink. Now, immediately after the general elections, which was stated to be formal elections by the Japanese government, as well as by Mr. Sasakawa, the military junta, they did the coup d'etat. They completely changed the situation in the country, and the attitude of the Japanese government also changed together with that incident.
そういうことは言えば終わらないので、とりあえず私たちは久保田さんの解放に求めて行動しなければならない。私も北住さんも、笠井さんも、そして日本中の皆さんもそういう気持ちが一緒だと私は思っています。
So I could go on and on about this, but what I would like to convey today is the immediate release of Mr. Kubota. Myself, Mr. Kitazumi, Mr. Kasai, as well as everyone in Japan, I believe, share this feeling.
同時にですね、ミャンマーで北住さんのお話にもあったように、すべての政治州を解放するよう、あるいはミャンマーで民主主義と平和が取り戻すように、日本政府を私たちはこれからも働きかけていきたいと思います。ありがとうございます。
So, together with Mr. Kitazumi, I would like to appeal for the immediate release of all political prisoners in Myanmar who are currently detained, and also to wish for a democracy and peace to return to Myanmar. I would like to convey this message to the Japanese government. Thank you.
Thank you. And just the Sasakawa that Sui-san is talking about, I believe, is Yohei Sasakawa. He was the special envoy of the government of Japan for national reconciliation in Myanmar. Yeah, just for anybody who wants the name. Thank you very much. Well, I'll bag the first question, and I'll just scan the room. If you would like to ask a question, if you would just raise your hand and then come to the microphone and identify yourself. Kitazumi-san, if I would just like to, just the first question to you, if that's okay. What kind of conditions do you think Kubota-san is suffering right now? If you could tell us about your own experience. You mentioned that he can talk to his family, but only once or twice a month on the telephone.
はい。久保田さんは今、私が拘束されていたのと同じ陰線刑務所というところに収監されています。
Currently, Mr. Kubota is detained in the same prison that I was detained in, called Insen Prison.
私もそうだったのですけれども、独房にいると聞いています。
I understand, and this was my case. I think he's in a solitary confinement.
現在、日本大使館が、差し入れですとか、あと先ほどの通り、家族との電話ですとか、そういったことの仲介をしているところです。
At the moment, the Japanese government is mediating to allow certain goods to be taken to him in prison, as well as for him to be able to speak to his family on the phone.
現在のところ元気にしているということが伝わっています。
And we understand that he's doing well physically.
ビルマ語の勉強をしたいと言って、ビルマ語の、テキストを、取り寄せたりですね、あと本が読みたいと言って、いろんな本を、家族や支援者が差し入れたりということをしています。
He has requested for a textbook to study the Burmese language. He has also asked his family as well as his supporters to send him some books because he wants to read.
想像される彼の状態なんですけれども、私と同じようなところだと聞いているので、2.5 メートル ×4 メートルのレンガ造りの、古い建物の極舎の一室でないかと思います。
So I'm just speculating that if he is in the same building, detention center that I was in, it would be a 2.5 meters by 4 meters brick building, and he's probably confined in one of the rooms there.
トイレは穴が開いているだけ、ベッドはただの板というですね、すのこの用の板なんですけど、のような粗末なところですけれども、ただ多くのミャンマーの政治犯は、100人以上が体育館のようなところに押し込められている、そういう状態で収監されていまして、その人たちに比べると、外国人だからということで特別待遇を受けているということだと思います。
So the toilet there is just a hole on the floor or on the ground, and the bed is just a board. So it's a very simple setup. But if you think about the Myanmar national detainees, over 100 people are all squeezed into an auditorium. And because Mr. Kubota is a foreign national, I think his treatment is considered to be a special treatment.
周囲の、拘束者と、助け合いながら、暮らしているというふうにも聞いています。ただ、インセイン刑務所は先日、爆発事件がありまして、その後、一切の、差し入れが、禁止されてしまいました。 またたびたび抗議活動が、起きてそれが鎮圧されるという事件も聞いていますので、その中で、監視が厳しくなっている可能性があります。
So from what we understand, he is trying to survive by trying to help other detainees, and they're trying to help each other. But recently, there was an incident of explosion at the Insen prison, and since then, all goods which were being sent to Mr. Kubota or anyone else there has been prohibited. So we believe that the situation is worsening at this prison, and whatever demonstrations or protests have now been suppressed even more. So the surveillance probably has been escalated at this prison.
Thank you. This is a question which has come in online. This is from Pio D'Emilia of Sky TG24, Italian TV station. Are you satisfied? I think this one would be to Kasai-san, yeah? Are you satisfied with the Japanese government's actions so far? If not, what do you suggest could be done? And Pio's question has two parts. Maybe you could just address the Sasakawa intervention. What do you think that made things good or bad? Or
Okay. All right, thank you. So I think, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what Sasakawa-san has been doing in terms of this case, but I think in terms of what the Japanese government can do, but isn't doing, is targeted sanctions against junta leaders. That means asset freezes and travel bans, for example, against Min Aung Hlaing or other high-ranking military officials in Myanmar. And then, as everyone is aware, Japan has not frozen ongoing non-humanitarian ODA. They haven't signed off new non-humanitarian ODA, but the ODA programs that were agreed to before the coup are still ongoing. So those are two diplomatic tools that the Japanese government can use but hasn't used. Japan can also support a global arms embargo resolution at the UN Security Council. Obviously, Japan is not a member, but they can still support states that are calling for such an arms embargo. I think in recent months, I think there's been increased air raids, air bombings, and I think what the Japanese government can do is try and coordinate with governments who are trying to cut off the junta's access to aviation fuel, because that's something that the junta needs to conduct these airstrikes.
Thank you. So are officials from the Myanmarese government coming to and from Japan? I mean, if you say you want sanctions to stop them, that implies they're coming or not?
Yeah, that would mean that high-ranking military commanders cannot enter Japan. Yeah, it would be travel bans as well as asset freezes. So we don't know how much assets the Myanmar military has in Japan, but it's always a possibility, and I think if they place these sanctions, they can freeze them.
Right. Yeah. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, the Japanese government's approach is mealy-mouthed. It's not as harsh as it could be. Why do you think that is?
So I think Japan has been soft-pedaling its approach to the Myanmar coup as well as against the Myanmar military leaders. Is partly because it positions itself as a mediator between so-called Western governments and Myanmar, and that the Japanese government has been taking this approach before the coup. Obviously, after the coup, the Japanese government has issued statements condemning the violence, as well as calling for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi and other democratic leaders. But those are just statements. They basically have had no impact. And whatever pipe or whatever channel that the Japanese government likes to talk about with the Myanmar military leaders has been basically ineffective. It has not done much. So what Japan should be doing is changing its approach. But for some reason, it's been almost 2 years since the coup, and the Japanese government has been doing the same thing over and over again with no results.
Thank you. Just scanning the room again. If you would like to ask a question, raise your hand so I can identify you. Otherwise, I will keep going to online questions. The next question online is from Ilgin Yolumaz, who's with BBC World Turkish. She addresses this. This is a question for Kitazumi-san. What do you think was the most important reaction or effective intervention that helped secure your release? So what secured your release? What was most effective in securing your release? And what's your advice to Kubota-san? That's two questions.
僕の時の話ですね。私の場合はですね、日本大使館をはじめ、いろんなルートで、多角的なアプローチをしていたというふうに思います。例えば大使自身がですね、刑務所に来て、差し入れを持ってきて、そこで刑務所の人間に待遇を改善を求めていると、そういったことを多くのレベルでしていたように思います。現在、はい。
So in my case, I think the Japanese government, as well as other channels, they kind of cooperated to conduct a multifaceted approach to work for my release. The Japanese ambassador to Myanmar himself visited me in prison with some goods, and he directly spoke with the people at the prison to improve my condition.
現在のミャンマー大使は丸山一郎大使で40年以上のミャンマーの経験がある歴戦の外交官です。彼はよくどこを押せば国軍が動くのかということを理解していたと思います。
The current Japanese ambassador to Myanmar is Mr. Ichiro Maruyama, who has had dealings with Myanmar for over 40 years. And as a diplomat, he understands which button to push in order to make the military government respond.
最終的には私の場合、久保田さんの場合もそうだと認識していますが、トップ案件になっていたというふうに思います。なので、ミン・アウン・ライン国軍司令官が、決断を下したと認識していますが、そこに至るまで、いろんなチャンネルを通じて、働きかけていたという理解です。
Ultimately, in my case, and I think this is what is going to happen to Mr. Kubota too, the decision is going to be up to the top leader, who is the military commander-in-chief, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. I think it will be his decision ultimately.
There was a question about any advice for Kubota-san. Do you have any advice for him?
そうですね、精神的に、くじけないということが本当に大切だと思います。ですので、おそらく助けてくれる、ミャンマー人の仲間が、収容者拘束者がいると思いますので、そういう人たちと励まし合いながら、心を強く持ってほしいというふうに思います。
Well, my single advice would be for him to stay strong mentally and to not succumb to this situation. That is very important. I'm sure there are other prisoners of Myanmar nationals, prisoners, who are around, who would be helping him, or they would be helping each other. So I hope that he would stay strong.
Thank you. Andy?
Hi there, this is Andy Sharp from Nikkei Asia. So during the more optimistic times, the Japanese government invested a lot of money into Myanmar, into places such as the Thilawa Special Economic Zone, etc. Then, of course, the coup happened and things changed rapidly. But do you think that because of the investments that Japan has made, this may be a reason why the foreign ministry here and Japanese government here are not making as much of an effort to help release Kubota-san as they could have. I'm not sure who, maybe Kasai-san and Kitazumi-san could answer that question. Thank you.
はい、日本企業の進出が、その久保田さんの影響にどう影響があるかということと理解したのですけれども、基本的にあまり影響がないんだと思います。また、そういう外部の条件をですね、彼の、解放の交渉と絡めてはいけないと思います。あくまで、不当に拘束された、日本人を救出するという話ですので、無条件での即時解放を求めていくというのが正しい姿だと思います。
I think the impact of the Japanese corporations who went to Myanmar for business, I don't think that this issue or past investment has a direct impact on the release of Mr. Kubota, and it should not have any impact on his release. It should not be used as a card for negotiations. I think the stance here is that a Japanese national has been detained unjustly and that he needs to be released immediately without any condition. It should be unconditional release. So that is what I would like to strongly advocate.
Thank you. Kasai-san, would you like to address that question? There's a related question here, by the way, from Ilkin Yorumas, and it's directed to you. Japan is accused of applying double standards when doing business with Myanmar and its oppressive government. Is there a solution to avoid this conflict of interest?
So I've been following the situation or Japan-Myanmar relation before the coup, especially after the Rohingya refugee crisis. And I think everyone's aware that the foreign ministry, JICA, as well as major Japanese companies, Japan's private sector worked in tandem to hold a Rakhine State investment fair. Obviously, that was criticized tons at the time. And when you see what's happened after the coup, you see some major Japanese companies cutting their losses and saying, okay, we're not going to be able to do business here, and they leave, which you had with Kirin, and I'm sure there are other Japanese companies who have left. But I'm also aware that there are Japanese companies who the latest information I have is they have maintained, for example, indirect or direct ties with military-owned conglomerates, MEC or MEHL. The issue here is that the Japanese government and Japan's private sector wasn't doing human rights due diligence before the coup and after the coup. They weren't doing the necessary research. Just thinking that if they can be the first one to invest, in Myanmar, that they can beat, for example, China's private sector or other countries' private sector, and I think that was kind of the purpose here, right? I think the Rohingya refugee crisis, it was something that the private sector should have taken much more seriously, the Japanese government as well. Obviously, you didn't see Japanese companies pull out of Myanmar because of that, right? Or we're not calling for them to pull out of Myanmar, but to cut ties with the junta. After the coup, obviously, it's something that they can no longer ignore. It's now in their front yard, right? It's not just about what they saw as something happening to the Myanmar's minorities. Now it's the cruelty is being perpetuated against the majority of people, right? So to your question, I think to answer your question, I think it definitely does is a factor at play in terms of the foreign minister's diplomacy. I'm sure that they consider it, but I wouldn't say it's a decisive factor. I'm sure it's an element, but I don't want to speculate too much, but thank you.
Thank you. Again, if you would like to ask a question in the room, just put your hand up. The gentleman here I see in front of me, and then the gentleman behind him. Yep, those all. Just tell us who you are if you can. Thanks.
東京新聞の北川と申します。北住さんに2点ほどお伺いしたいんですが、まず陰線刑務所での爆発事件のことを言及されてましたが、爆発事件の後、大使館も含めてもう接触できない状態になっているという理解でいいのかというのが一つと、3つの 罪の裁判のことをおっしゃってまして、2つは軍事法廷で、軍事法廷については控訴はできないと理解していて、判決としては確定したのかと思うんですが、入管法違反の方は通常法廷で、通常法廷だとミャンマー三審制だと思うんですが、そちらの方の扱いはどうなっているのか、確か判決出てちょうど2週間になると思うんですが、それについて何かご存知だったら教えてください。
So, my name is Kitagawa from Tokyo Shimbun. I'd like to ask this question to Mr. Kitazumi because he was detained in the same Insen prison. You alluded to the explosion there, the incident. Does this mean that the Japanese embassy is no longer able to be in touch with Mr. Kubota after this incident, this explosion? You also alluded to the three crimes allegedly committed by Mr. Kubota, two of which were tried in the military tribunal. And I understand that whatever the military tribunal handles, tries, cannot be appealed. But the third one, which was violating the immigration law, I understand that in Myanmar, that you can appeal this kind of crime to the upper court and then maybe to the Supreme Court. It has been 2 weeks since the decision was announced regarding the violation of the immigration law. What is happening to this situation?
はい、まず1つ目、爆発事件の後の状況ですけれども、全国の刑務所で差し入れが禁止されているというふうに理解しています。ただ、久保田さんの場合の領事サービス、家族、大使館との電話は LINE が生きていると認識しています。
So, regarding what happened after the explosion, the incident, you cannot send goods to the prisoners in prison at all prisons in Myanmar. However, regarding a consulate service that is provided to Mr. Kubota, such as his phone conversation with his family, that is continuing.
2つ目、入管法違反の、その後なのですけれども、少なくとも私が知る限り、本人側、が控訴する意向があるとは聞いていません。
Regarding the second question, which is the violation of the immigration law, as far as I know, I understand that he hasn't expressed any intention of appealing regarding the decision.
Thank you, the gentleman there. And if ちょっと時間限られてますので、なるべく一つの質問お願いします。
共同通信の記者の篠原と申します。今日はありがとうございます。北住さんに1点質問があります。今久保田さんは同じ刑務所に拘束中ということなんですけれども、ご自身の拘束中にですね、最も厳しい過酷な状況だったと、今考えていること、感じたこと、でそれをどう克服、乗り越えたのか、伺える範囲内で教えてください。よろしくお願いします。
This is Shinohara from Kyoto, and my question is to Mr. Kitazumi. Mr. Kubota is currently detained in the same prison that you were detained. While you were detained, what was the harshest condition that you had to undergo, and how did you overcome that situation? How did you stay put?
はい、自分の精神をですね、前向きに持っていくことが一番大変だったというふうに思います。私独房だったんですけれども、これ現場の判断でですね、その扉が開いてその周囲の、政治犯と交流ができる、そういう時間があるんですけれども、それがあったりなかったりするのですね。で数日間ほとんど独房にいる時期もありまして、そういった時にどうやって自分の精神をまともに持っていくかが一番課題だったというふうに思います。
The harshest situation for me was to stay positive. As I said, I was in solitary confinement, but based on how the prison was run at the moment, there were times when the door to the prison was open so that I can sort of have exchanges or communication with the prisoners around me. But this sometimes happened, this sometimes did not happen. And when it didn't happen for a few days, and I was totally on my own, it was very difficult for me to stay positive.
例えば独房にいるとですね、私の仲間が自分のために捕まっているのではないかとかですね、いろんな心配ばかりが頭をよぎるようになります。その中で、例えば筋トレをしたりとかですね、あと私は書くものを与えられていなかったので、どうにかしてここで起きたことを記録しようとして、お茶の葉で、字をインクにして字を書いてみたり、コーヒーで試してみたり、カレーの汁で文字を書いてみたりと、そういうことをしてですね、なんとか自分の気持ちを前向きにしようというふうに努めていました。
So since I was in solitary confinement, I was constantly worried about my colleagues and people, my supporters or my friends, whether they might be arrested on my behalf. That was my major concern. Also, I tried to exercise in my confinement, and I didn't have anything to write. But I wanted to record what was happening to me at that moment. So I would use tea leaves or coffee or maybe a curry, soup or something like that to record and to write what was happening to me.
Thank you. Thomas, did you have a question? It has to be a really quick one, if you don't mind.
Sure. My name is Thomas Ash, and I'm a documentary filmmaker. There may be people who hear about this story, and they don't really understand how it affects them in this country. It may just feel like something happening in a country far away. Can you give a message to the Japanese public about why the freedom of press in a foreign country matters to us here?
はい。久保田さんは、神奈川県で生まれ育って、全く日本の私たちと同じ、ような、育ち方をしています。それが、学生時代からミャンマーに行って取材に行くうちに、ミャンマーで起きていることは彼の友達に起きていることだと、そういうふうに思うようになったんだと思います。その他取材を続けているうちに、社会的な弱い人、アシュさんも取材している牛久の、収容者ですとか、そういう人々に取材して友達を作る中で、それも人事ではないというふうに思っていくようになったんだと思います。彼のように日本で身近にいる人が社会に思いを馳せるということは、これはできることだと思います。彼のメッセージにあった通り、ミャンマーで生きる人のことに注目してほしい彼のメッセージですので、ぜひ日本の人たちにもそう思ってほしいと思います。
Well, Mr. Kubota was born and raised in Kanagawa Prefecture. He's a very regular Japanese person. He started traveling to Myanmar as a student and also to do some filming there. And so he considered people there as his friends. He would be observing what was happening to them in that country and considered to be his own acquaintance and friends. And as he continued his journalist work, he began to be very concerned about the so-called socially vulnerable people. And he continued to make friends and considered their plight as something that wasn't happening to some stranger far away, but something that was very akin to his own self. So even if you are far away from the incident, I think it's very possible to have this empathetic feeling to people in other countries, other regions. Just like Mr. Kubota, and his message was to focus and to know about what is happening to the people in Myanmar. So I think we can take that message to heart.
Thank you very much. Well, we are out of time, so thank you to our three speakers. It's not a happy talk at all, but we do hope that Kitazumi-san, we do hope that Kubota-san will get released soon, and that people will continue to put pressure. Thank you to Kitazumi-san, to Kasai-san, and Soe-san for coming today and explaining the case, and thank you everybody for coming to hear them. Do show your appreciation for the speakers, if you don't mind. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。